Well, there's like different parts of the show that are enjoyable other than just, the intergenerational dynamics are just one part of it.
Oh
And it
yeah.
mixes into the work dynamics. Um,
Yes.
and that's like another thing is like, so the work dynamics are, of course, there's obvious class things. And again, with a vampires episode, that is an example of somehow they're kind of climbers. But also with Guillermo being sort of like their employee, and he's like an on-call employee, is expected to work all these hours, and he's not being paid per se, which is kind of funny. But he's still dedicated because he wants to be a vampire until he finds out he's a Van Helsing, and that kind of complicates things. But
Yeah. Sorry.
but that is sort of like kind of funny how like dependent the like employer is actually on the employee. And at any time, the employee can really mess things up for the employer. Maybe that's what that's supposed to symbolize. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, so I think it's at the beginning of the Théâtre des Vampires.
Yeah,
I'm probably not
we're
saying that right, but
skewering.
I'm trying. In French. And in the beginning, remember he's kind of like on strike and has
Right.
left. And that's
Yeah.
part of how they get into that mess and don't recognize that it's a trap because they can't see through the scam.
Right.
Whereas, of course, Guillermo's the youngest and he is the most used to being taken advantage of perpetually and knows the modern world.
Right.
So he's like, this is totally a trap.
Yeah.
Go here, didn't they? And Nadia, or her doll,
Right.
like that houses her human ghost, tells him.
Yeah, that was ghost. That was a fun one.
So crazy.
Yeah.
She's so lonely, and like there's not tons of like vampire friends that they have. Actually, for how old they are, it's shocking how well. Actually, I guess it's realistic how small their social
Yeah.
circle is.
Yeah, because other than the Kristen Shaw character, I forget what that vampire's name
I
is.
can't remember,
Yeah.
but she hasn't showed up in the stuff
Right,
yet
and what we've
because
watched.
she'll be in
Like,
like the Vampire
she
Council things.
ends up being kind of the other woman, but they're clearly not really that close either.
No, they don't become friends.
Yeah.
Remember, like she's like because Nadia is very much a mean girl. Like she's the alpha, has to be
Right.
on top and like make sure that everyone is beneath her. It's
Right.
unhealthy
Well,
dynamic.
and Kristen Shaw's character, I think, becomes sort of the intermediary, because doesn't she kind of represent the Vampiric Council or something at one point?
She
in the show?
does, and then like things fall apart. But
Right.
that's like all different
Yeah, I
kinds of
guess.
stuff that we didn't want to go into. I
Right.
mean, I wasn't thinking we would. We didn't go that far.
Well,
But with the work dynamic,
yes. And then there's later in the show too, it almost becomes less about there's still the intergenerational like dynamics, but then when like Guillermo gets a job in like at that like financial services company, and then like he sort of like gets in, and Nadia gets a job, and she's like not really doing anything, and she's there more for the social aspect, but because like it's not like quite that Guillermo's free, but he wants to go and explore this new aspect and like actually work for someone. Then he finds out basically the humans are just as bad, if not worse, than the vampire bosses. Right. And then poor Nandor ends up becoming the janitor. And it's almost like because he's so old, like kind of old, that he can only do the janitor job and he's too slow and he's not good at it. And then Guillermo has to fire him and it's all sad. And like Nandor is trying to keep his dignity, even though his familiar has to fire him.
well, and then it's funny because then the vampires go into Guillermo's workplace actually to try to kind of goose it and help him.
Yeah, to help him,
It's
right.
sweet,
Yeah.
honestly, because they are trying to pay him back
Mhm.
for what he's done, right? But it's fascinating because then the vampires enter the workplace
Yeah.
and they're role playing as humans amazingly effectively.
Right. That's the thing, is they always they show how the vampires are basically have been able to hide in plain sight because these people are dumb, and like and because not everybody, but clearly the people they show that the humans are stupid. They really show that. And
Yeah.
they're very incidentally, because we're all, we're regular people. It really helps us if you like and subscribe if you're seeing this video on YouTube.
Share
And
with
again,
half.
and please, we have a Buy Me a Coffee, the page, which has the Buy Me a Coffee page has the episodes on it of its entirety and audio. Right now, we're just posting clips on YouTube. But if you want to listen to the whole podcast and the previous episodes, and maybe throw us a couple bucks, please feel free. Again, we're regular people just trying to get by.
Well, they also have the power of hypnosis. Nadia is very good
That's
at
true.
it.
She's very good at it.
Nandor's terrible at it.
They humor him. They humor Nandor about a lot, actually.
Oh my God. Okay. The song that it opens with.
Oh, yes.
I love that song because it's like, talking about how your hope and
Right.
compassion is gone. Right?
Yeah, yes.
You've been dead to the world. Stay dead, stay dead, stay dead and out of this world.
Right. Actually,
and it's just a perfect song to like set up the theme of the whole
Yes.
series.
And by the way, the original song, and I just found this out, called You're Dead. It's actually very popular. It was done by a Filipina American from Vallejo, California. I'm from represent Bay Area, where I'm from, named Norma Tanega, and it was recorded in 1966. So that's why it sounds like an old song, because it is an old folk song, which is pretty cool. Yeah, but yeah, very neat, and it is a great song. Now that does. And folk music at the time, and if we talk about Bob Dylan in an earlier episode, they were talking about class and generational dynamics, and you're dead, and out of this world, and you're have no use for the song and all that stuff. And it is clearly
they say if you want to live long, they have no use for your song. Stay dead, you're dead, stay dead and out of this world.
And I can almost picture like, the younger people of the 60s era telling their boomer parents, yeah, you're passé. You're done, like it's kind of funny. But ironically enough, now and then the show's now, and now people are saying that arguably to the boomers, and it all comes back around. And that's the other thing I kind of like about the both the intergenerational dynamics, but also by the of course the dynamics of the boss, because the boss and that Guillermo's boss is totally out of touch. He's trying to bro this and bro that and be all cool with the younger millennials and the Zers, and he's just a doofus.
It's true. And how like really the people at the top seem to do no work of any kind and yet get compensated for everything. But like in the vampire household, of how like Nandor and Nadia and Laszlo are always like hoovering up all the resources, all the everything. It's very interesting too. I like how when we were rewatching a few select episodes, and like when they do bring in the ancient mummy vampire and how he is the boss, and how everyone has a boss, because that's the other thing about work, right?
Everybody
now
has
all
a boss.
have a boss.
Everybody has a boss.
Time, and sometimes it's hard to figure out who the boss is.
Sometimes you have several bosses.
Sometimes there's a bunch of bosses.